So good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Dan Kraft, and as I said, on behalf of everybody at Forum Europe, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all to today's event on delivering the full fibre gigabit society. This event is the first in a new series of online policy discussions that we are organising here at Forum Europe that we're calling Under the Spotlight. So each event in the series is going to focus on one specific policy area and bring together key policymakers, industry representatives, and thought leaders to look in detail at the main discussion points around that. And we're delighted in this first event to be working with our strategic partners, Analysys Mason and Huawei, to be focusing on this key issue of full fibre rollout. So, as you, I'm sure, are all aware, the Commission has set ambitious targets for the rollout of very high capacity networks as it looks to achieve the objective of delivering the gigabit society in Europe by 2025. And with many member states arguably struggling to meet these targets, the issue of full fibre rollout was already very important and high up the radar of many people. But I think that the current COVID-19 crisis has, if anything, thrown even more prominence on the issue, given the huge amount of pressure that at the moment is being put on networks, and also the way in which the importance to all of us of reliable and fast connectivity has been highlighted over the past few months. So I'm not actually going to say too much more about the issues at this stage, as we have a fantastic lineup of speakers and experts who are much more knowledgeable about things than I am. But just before we start, and I do pass over to our speakers, I wanted to mention just a couple of things on the logistical side. First of all, it's not just our speakers that we want to hear from. We also want to hear from all of you on the issues that are being discussed, and also with any questions that you may have for our panel. So please do add all of your comments and questions in the chat bar on the right-hand side of the screen. You should be able to see on the right-hand side, you have a chat bar. And yeah, as I said, please do add your comments and your questions in there. And hopefully we can get a bit of interactive discussion going via that. And a selection of those questions and the comments will be passed to our moderator, Ian, today. And he will put the panelists up, and he will be putting these then to the panelists as part of the discussion. In addition to that, you can also see on the right-hand side of your screen a poll tab, and we do have a poll running relating to the content of the event, and more specifically to the main obstacle to full fibre rollout that exists. And please, we do invite you as well to go and have a look at that poll and give your thoughts and vote on that. And again, we'll be looking at some of the outcomes from that later on in the session. Secondly, in addition to taking place here on our event platform Forum Vision, this event is being streamed live on Twitter, both via the Forum Europe and the Huawei EU Twitter accounts. So if you're watching on Twitter, then hello to you as well. And I just wanted to remind all of you and anyone else that we do have a hashtag for the event, and you can see that scrolling at the bottom of the screen now. So the hashtag is #FullFibreOnline. So please do use that if you're going to post any tweets about the event. And finally, I just wanted to mention the networking side of things today. So after the discussion and the panel have taken place, we're going to be opening the networking area of the platform. And you're all going to have the opportunity to virtually meet and to chat with your fellow participants via one-to-one private video chat rooms that we're going to have available. We'll be saying a little bit more about that after the discussion, but please do stick around for that. And hopefully it's an opportunity to, as I said, to meet, to network, and maybe to continue discussions with people on a one-to-one basis. So without further ado, I would now like to get things started by welcoming Ian Watt, our moderator for the first session. Hi, Ian. Ian is going to be the moderator for today and is also going to be kicking us off by providing an introduction of the key issues and more specifically the outcomes of a report that he and his colleagues at Analysys Mason have released today on full fibre access and on some of these key areas. So Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. As Dan mentioned, I'm Ian Watt from Analysys Mason. For those of you who don't know us, Analysys Mason is a global consultancy and research firm, and we specialize in telecoms, media, and technology. Let me briefly run through the agenda for today. Shortly, I'll be handing over to Martin Zhu, President of Global Government Affairs at Huawei, to make some opening remarks. I'll then speak myself for a few more minutes. And then we will move to our panel discussion, and I'll introduce the panelists to you at that time. And then after that panel discussion, there'll be a Q&A session which you can participate in with the panel. Martin.
Thank you, Ian. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very delighted to join today's discussion. And the current COVID-19 pandemic has served to highlight and indeed accelerate many global trends. One such trend has been the growing importance of broadband speed and coverage. Widely available, high-quality digital connections has never been so important. For many people, high-quality broadband is now the most practical means of keeping in touch with friends and family, listening to music, watching TV, and managing personal finances. Take-up of FTTP in Europe, where it is available, is accelerating rapidly. As a result, it is now generally accepted among service providers, regulators, and policymakers that universally available high-speed broadband connectivity has become essential to our society. In order to make an important contribution to our discussion, we are delighted to launch a new position paper, Full Fiber Access as a Strategy Infrastructure, Strengthening Public Policy for Europe. This research has been undertaken by Analysys Mason and was commissioned by Huawei. The paper describes the current status and the challenges faced in extending full fiber coverage, international best practice, and the need for coherent and positive set of policies to deliver such high-performance networks for decades to come. The advantages of full fiber are becoming clearer of the day. White copper and coax-based technologies face performance constraints. New fiber technologies do not require alteration of existing optical distribution network. FTTP standards have a detailed roadmap, and next-generation PON systems are being deployed commercially. Growing numbers of operators are focusing more of their attention on FTTP as CapEx and OpEx benefits become clearer. Full fiber networks also use less energy than alternatives and are best suited to fueling a green agenda. FTTP networks additionally offer ultra-low latency, which makes them suitable to be used alongside Wi-Fi 6 and 5G technology, and for supporting artificial intelligence applications. FTTP networks can also be extended to the end-user terminal and IoT devices with FTTP coverage. In early every case, this has been facilitated by clear and ambitious government policy and consistent regulatory practice. In general, outcomes have been positive in countries where access and infrastructure is treated as having underlying strategic importance. In contrast, European regulation has tended to favor retail competition and low prices over long-term investment and digital spillovers. Labor costs in Europe definitely are high, and the strict planning laws have delayed FTTP deployment in some countries. Nevertheless, there have been some notable success stories in some countries, but in others, experience has been more mixed. This position paper concludes that in some European countries, a more focused and hands-on approach is required. It suggests that governments actively manage the deployment of low-layer access infrastructure. In particular, ducts should be managed as priority national infrastructure. Unbundled access to multi-fiber networks should be promoted. Where necessary, regional franchises should be created with a balance of obligations and rewards. Rural networks should be shared in the first instance, then subsidized. Infrastructure targets are preferable to bandwidth targets. Copper scrappage should be incentivized and accelerated. There should be drawn-up thinking between telecoms and environmental policies. It is my great pleasure to invite Ian Watt to introduce the key findings of this position paper, and then we can discuss the main issues raised during our panel discussions. So thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you, Martin. So just as Martin says, a little bit more on the report out today and available on Huawei's website. The purpose of the report is to demonstrate the value of a policy-led infrastructure-first approach to broadband, to highlight the benefits of full fibre, and to point to where policy and regulation should be changed or adapted. We begin with a snapshot of where we were at the end of 2019 and where we expect to be by 2025, given current plans. We see that European FTTP coverage in 2019 varied greatly. Several countries are doing well, with Portugal, Spain, and Sweden surpassing even Japan and South Korea, but others are doing less well. 6 countries had coverage below 15%, and 5, including Germany, below 10%. We estimate that European FTTP coverage overall at the end of 2019 was just over 5%, a little ahead of the USA, but significantly behind benchmark early movers like China and Japan. By the end of 2025, we expect overall European coverage to reach just over 64%, but we expect coverage in 6 countries, including Germany, to remain below 40% even by then. Demand in Europe for full fibre has picked up greatly in the last 3 years, although there are still some countries where it's relatively unknown and where take-up is still modest. Use cases are plentiful, whether supporting Wi-Fi or 5G, business cloud working, consumer entertainment, or reliable home working. There'll be more applications, and they'll be ever more demanding. But the case isn't just built on bandwidth hogging applications. End users want reliability coupled with symmetrical speed, not as an opt-in guarantee for a premium price or attached only to certain bundled applications, but as a basic requirement. The roadmap for copper and coax acceleration technologies is relatively short, the physical medium in each case imposing fundamental limitations that constrain performance. By contrast, the ITU roadmap for fibre extends beyond the horizon. On a single optical infrastructure, all standardized technologies can coexist, ensuring smooth migration to next generation technologies. As a result, a number of major equipment vendors, including Huawei and Nokia, are focusing investment on 50 GPON and 25 GPON, also for the future 100 GPON. This is also the point where the most modern and efficient wireless transport solutions meet the world of wireline access. Operators themselves are beginning to realize that in the long term, improvements in copper and cable technologies won't save money or be sufficiently flexible or sustainable. The latest copper acceleration technologies have struggled to make a significant impact on the market. VDSL 35B supervectoring and GFAR both failed to generate many large-scale deployments. Also, the green agenda hasn't gone away. Full fiber networks use less energy than alternatives. FTTP-based broadband uses less power in the central office and no powered outside plant. FTTP GPON home gateways use less power than the nearest copper or cable equivalents. For indoor mobile use, it makes performance and environmental sense to move to greener fiber and low power indoor Wi-Fi rather than rely on outdoor mobile networks. Looking beyond Europe, many advanced economies in the Asia-Pac region already have a high level of FTTP coverage. In nearly every case, this has been helped by clear and ambitious government policy and consistent regulatory practice. In general, outcomes have been positive in countries where it is treated as strategic infrastructure. Within Europe, there have been a number of success stories. For example, in Sweden, Spain, and France, but elsewhere in Europe, the experience has been more mixed. What these successes have in common is policy that treats the development of fiber infrastructure as being of strategic importance, creating a structure that enables multiple overlaid fiber networks or multiple operating companies and technologies on common fiber infrastructures. Elsewhere in Europe, there are barriers to this infrastructure-first approach. The report examines various policies that can help full fiber deployment, including supportive wayleave law, infrastructure sharing, pre-installation of fiber in new building developments, and regulation allowing for the swifter decommissioning of copper. The report also examines the wide variation between countries in public subsidy levels for high-speed broadband and how these compare with what is frequently much higher expenditure on other categories of public infrastructure. We conclude that a more dirigiste approach is required and that public money is best spent on enabling the conditions for flourishing competition-driven innovation and service improvement. This means a strategic focus on fibre as infrastructure, which should encourage the greatest possible diversity of vendors, operating companies and services. In our view, policy should encourage options for access at as low a layer as possible, that is, physical infrastructure or dark fibre access, and that public money, where required, should be spent enabling such low-layer access. This might mean, for example, that public money is spent creating ducts for competing fibre infrastructures, enabling the kind of model that has already delivered results in France, Spain, and Portugal. Private investment in fibre is picking up in Europe, but some of that commercial enthusiasm may lead to its own problems. Retrofitting a more managed approach, such as that seen in France, may prevent inefficient investment and disappointment for both investors and end users, while preserving diversity of technology and operating companies. Oversight of already commercially negotiated shared networks or mutualized access in non-urban areas could be part of this approach, if this ultimately allows public money to be focused on the most economically challenging areas. Analysys Mason's report was drawn up as the COVID-19 crisis started to emerge. What this crisis has done for our industry is to shine a light on the need for robust connectivity. Economies will eventually re-emerge even more dependent on the digital sphere. State involvement in the economy has suddenly grown. States will look for longer-term solutions, fixes. They'll look for social benefits in return for financial aid, and for the right kind of policy, the best targeted stimulus to get things moving again and to maximize diversity in the digital ecosystem. A focus on full fibre as strategic infrastructure is, we think, a good place to start. I'd now like to introduce our panel for today. We have Franco Accordino from DG Connect at the European Commission. We have Michelle van Bellinghen from BEREC, Luca Passando from ETSI, Aurélie Blaroja Coelho from FTTH Council Europe, and Hui Cao from Huawei. Franco, can I ask you to start, please?
So thank you very much, Dan, for the introduction, and also to all the speakers and for the invitation. Really very much look forward to an interesting discussion here, because the message I received from the report is that it's very much in line with what we are working on at the Commission level. So, but let me introduce a few words about the announcement that took place yesterday. As you know, I mean, we have a proposal for an unprecedented budget for the next generation union, the way our president calls it. I mean, these events indeed takes place during a very historical moment. We create an instrument that is dedicated to address the emerging needs of the COVID recovery. As mentioned before, the lockdown has shaken all of us. Putting under stress the resilience of our healthcare and welfare systems, our societies, our economies, and the way we live and we work together. So we believe that if the member states will accept this budget envelope, this will make a significant step forward. Not only to overcome the emergency, but really to prepare Europe for the long-lasting recovery and prosperity period. I'm speaking here about for the next generation EU budget, additional 700 billion euro, which goes on top of the multi-annual financial framework. So for a total of 1.85 trillion euro. I mean, you agree with me, I'm sure, that this is an unprecedented envelope at the European level. I mean, so it is an historical moment. So sorry for taking the 2 minutes time to say this, but I couldn't refrain to share with you my let's say, believing to that. The point is where this money will go. If you look at the proposal, I mean, clearly digital and also green all together, this is a tandem that is a leitmotif of our president's political agenda, and it's fully reflected into the budget proposal. I mean, those two policies are intimately connected, and we see these also, of course, in our own discussion, because when applied on a large scale, digital technology can significantly reduce the energy footprint, the carbon footprint in many vertical sectors, for instance, transport. I mean, the world is changing, definitely. I mean, the fact that today here at home, we have 4 people working simultaneously, and one of them, myself, participating in real time to such an online event. I think this is something that we are witnessing everyone, every day. I mean, we are experiencing, but we are somehow realizing that it's a turning point. It's a turning point. So we have seen how much impressive was, I mean, the impact of this confinement on the carbon emission, because we don't have to travel so frequently to work, and being queued in the jam. So there is a clear connection here as an enabler for connectivity. Fibre is helping achieving a greener society. And of course, this is it is also important to look at it as an energy efficient digital technology, as it has been mentioned before, because in this respect, we know that fiber per se brings important energy efficiency gains compared to other technologies like copper, of course. So I fully agree in this respect with the recommendations of the study. So now, one important thing still related to COVID, I don't want to have a COVID speech here, but I think it's important to look at, I mean, this will come, of course, with more and more studies and tons of paper that will be written about that. But one thing that is emerging is really this is a planetary teleworking or home working experience, which is revealing more than ever the importance of connectivity as a public universal service. I mean, it's just like a utility, like water. And through that, we just do e-commerce. We buy many goods and even food. I mean, we can say that connectivity and digital become more popular, I think, stimulating demand for more interactive, immersive application scenarios. So I'm pretty sure that in the mind of many of us, I mean, really at the planetary level, I mean, the confinement has a stimulating kind of imagination toward the future. And I think this is very important because we translated into numbers, translated into evidence. This brings elements for investments at all levels, of course. So I'm very glad that the study identified a few future-oriented application scenarios, which are not really future-oriented any longer. Probably they could come in the coming years. More interactivity, more responsiveness, more fully immersive, type of application scenarios that all require, of course, low latency, high bandwidth, and of course, plenty of more digital technologies developed around that, of course, for which connectivity is a fundamental enabler. But I'm curious to hear from the other panelists how they see the evolution of the actual demand for gigabit connectivity in the light of these planetary experience. I mean, it's very important that, I mean, those, of course, who have studied, I mean, the markets where fiber and very, very high capacity networks have been already deployed since years, and so they are a bit ahead of the others. Of course, I mean, I have to say, yes, ahead of the others, and in particular Europe, because as it has been mentioned, I mean, the Digital Economy and Societal Index shows a number of signals there that yes, we are advancing quite a lot, but we could do better in terms of ultra fast broadband, both coverage and take up. I think this is this is will not change with the new version of the index we are working on. I cannot say too much, but I mean the trend is identified. We need to absolutely accelerate the deployments if we want to achieve the 2025 gigabit target that were mentioned before, which I prefer not to repeat in order to gain time. So, but I mean, what are we doing concretely? I just wanted to say a few words on that at the European level, but also at the national, regional level, because this is just an ecosystem and one player only will not make a difference. So we need to act all together at all levels. So you know that there are the European Structural Investment Funds, the so-called ERDF, EAFRD, I mean, and that they are supporting high-capacity networks in underserved areas. So up to now, we have invested 6 billion euro up to 2020 from that fund. Of course, this has been managed at the regional and national level, but I mean, it's a fund that is part of the European budget, and the Commission has proposed to continue these let's say share management programs in the EU cohesion policies also in the next programming period, even though of course the budget is under discussion. Then we have the European Fund for Strategic Investments. Strategic investments, I mean, financial instruments have become a very more popular for infrastructure type of projects, because they can be very interesting for investors. Up to now, we have invested 3 billion euro, mostly in the form of guarantees and loans via the European Investment Bank, which have leveraging more than 13 billion euro for investment in digital infrastructure projects. I mean, more close to the area of my competence in my own unit, I mean, we have launched in 2018 the Connecting Europe Broadband Fund, which is an equity type of investment, together with the European Investment Bank and the national promotional banks and institutions, which play also a fundamental role in funding infrastructure deployments. So the idea is there really to, it's not just an idea, I can elaborate, I mean, because we have concrete cases already about of projects funded by this fund, which deploy FTTP to 100,000, if not millions of households in Europe. So here we have a leverage of between 1 billion and 1.7 billion euro. So a lot of things that are just happening now. I mean, and I feel important to mention this to you and to the audience, because I think Brussels is present there, more than present, is active and delivering on the broadband investment funds. I mean, looking at the future, of course, I mean, this is very much under discussion. We have seen the proposal. We have got about 2 billion euro for supporting the Connecting Europe Facility digital program. This is still a proposal, so the member states, the Council, and the European Parliament will have a say on that. This is, of course, I mean, complementing member states' effort, of course, to make Europe 5G ready. And you know here that there is an intimate relation again between fiber and 5G. So here the objective we have in mind, but I will not elaborate too much at this stage, is really to leverage investment. So for each euro we put into the Connecting Europe Facility investment, we want to have at least a factor of 2.5, even if not higher, the multiplication factor in order to increase the power of the investment. So looking at fiber backbone networks with the strategic importance for the EU. I know this is not the scope of the study, but it's very important when we speak about, you know, making a high-performance computing facility, an exascale facility, available to small enterprises, which is perhaps home based in a remote area of Europe. You need also the backbones, or even in a remote islands. So this is part of the scope of CEF, but also a significant part of CEF will be on connecting households with very high capacity networks, and in particular fiber networks in less commercial attractive areas. So of course we do quite a lot of things at European level. Also, it's not just only investments that we do it directly on our side, or with the shared management with the member states, or by leveraging private investments. In order to do that, you also need to act, as it has been widely highlighted in the report, with the regulatory and policy measures. Okay, so I'll give you 3 examples because otherwise I'm taking too long. First of all, the state aid. I mean, state aid is a trade-off between making sure that the competition take place in a normal manner. So it has to be pro-competition. State aid is pro-competition, let's say, type of regulatory approach. And of course, you might have heard that, I mean, our Vice President Vestager announced recently the revision of the broadband state aid guidelines, which have been developed back in 2013 and are currently still in force. I mean, still the reference for investors. Of course, in this case for public investors. But of course, I mean, I cannot commit at this stage on the exact timing for that. But I mean, I can tell you that we are working night and day with our colleagues in DG competition to of course, I mean, to advance on that file. These will, we will really look forward. These will unlock, I mean, more possibilities, of course, to upgrade. Let's say copper-based networks into fiber networks. Of course, this is a quite ongoing process. I cannot say anything more at this stage, but really, what I can say is that definitely we need guidelines fit for the Gigabit 2025 objectives. I mean, this is an ongoing process, and we will follow very closely with our colleagues. Another point is, of course, the European Electronic Communication Code, but I will not elaborate too much on that. I can do that later if necessary. But certainly the code is also, it was when it was published, a great turning point because not only because it's harmonized, fragmented regulation, but also because it was really directed to promote VHCN investments and fiber being a part of it, of course. And other measures that are not necessarily really investment as such are more enablers like mapping. So this is a fundamental tool for many purposes, which can serve a state aid assessment, help state aid assessment, but also planning investments and monitoring the regulatory compliance. I close here my intervention because I think I took perhaps a bit too long, but I'm of course much available. I mean, to elaborate later if time will allow. Thank you.
Franco, thank you very much for those comments. Very interesting. A lot happening there and difficult to cram into the time available. So we'll hear from Franco more later. And we'd like to go next to Michel van Bellinghen from BEREC. Michel.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much, Jan. Connectivity cannot be underestimated. The previous speaker mentioned that we need to recognize that this telecommunication sector, as demonstrated, is vital role for society and the economy as a whole. And we could fear a breakdown, but it didn't materialize for 2 reasons. Thanks to the investment made by the telecom sector, and thanks to the measures taken during the pandemic. And there was an excellent cooperation between the industry, regulators, and the commissions for that. But one of the points that, and one of the lessons learned during this COVID crisis was also the importance of addressing the EU's digital divide. Up to 15% of people across Europe have no access to high-speed internet. So promoting full high-capacity connectivity across Europe is a main mission arising from this crisis. And this is, for BEREC, an important policy goal to consider. That's the reason why promoting full connectivity is one of BEREC's high strategic priorities for the coming years. But now back to 2020. 2020 is for BEREC the year of the implementations of the codes, as Franco mentioned. This is the prime driver of this objective. We know that the codes will come into effect at the end of this year, and BEREC's main role in this code is ensuring a harmonized implementation of the code by developing guidelines. And actually, there is a pretty high number of guidelines to be developed by BEREC by the end of this year. 11 in total. Some of them have been already adopted, but otherwise are still in the pipeline. And I would just give 3 examples of those guidelines who will provide guidance to NRAs and stakeholders, and also create a kind of regulatory stability and a predictable environment. The first example is the definition of very high capacity networks. We had a consultation on this draft guideline. We're looking in the stakeholders' reactions, and we aim to publish them at the end of this year. This is an important guideline for different reasons and for different provisions of the codes. For instance, the conditions under which an NRA shall impose or not certain obligation on wholesale-only undertakings, or it's important too for the geographical surveys of network deployment. That's the first example. Another example of important guideline is the guidelines on co-investment. This is an essential building blocks for Europe digital future. It will facilitate the rollout of new very high capacity fixed networks by making rules for co-investment more predictable and promoting risk sharing in the deployment of those networks. And for this draft guideline, we will invite stakeholders again to share their views during the next month before finalizing them. A last example of important guidelines, as foreseen in our work program, is the launch of a consultation on the guidelines regarding the location of the distribution points up to which symmetric obligation may apply. That's for the implementation of the code. Now looking ahead, what will BEREC do in the forthcoming years? So we are, as a regulator, ready to promote access and take up to this very high capacity network. Doing so, we identify competition problems that may arise in different member states as high-speed networks are being developed and legacy networks are being phased out. I will come back to this later on. So we will keep connectivity as strategic priority, as I already mentioned, in the coming years, meaning by that we want to improve the conditions for expansion and take-up of those high-capacity networks, both fixed and wireless, across Europe. And in this domain, it is very important to have a smooth transition from legacy infrastructure to this new network. And I'm well aware, living in Belgium, because we know that we are the tail of the European benchmark when it comes to the availability of FTTH connection. So we know how important it is. Another crucial factor to stimulate investment in the fiber rollout is to reduce the cost of the rollout, both in terms of financial costs as well as administrative burden. And that's the reason why the review of the broadband costs reduction directive is particularly important in the coming month and years. But this is what the Commission is reviewing at the moment by simplifying permits and procedure to reduce this administrative burden. I can't talk about fiber without saying something about 5G for different reasons. 5G is dependent on fiber. And one of the reasons is that 5G needs very high capacity and quality backhaul to connect mobile sites. So the availability of these high capacity fiber backhaul is a prerequisite for the deployment of 5G. And depending on the assessment of competitive condition, wholesale access to fiber backhaul connectivity of cell site needs to be ensured and regulated where necessary to bottleneck facilities, and in particular in less competitive geographical areas. I've started with the general situation, the COVID crisis. This COVID crisis has shown that there is more attention to being paid to strengthening connectivity and investment. We know that there has always been a kind of tension between deregulation and regulation, but we know that for regulators it's important to have the right balance between promoting investments and promoting competition. In that prospect, we see that the context indeed can vary from country to country. On the infrastructure side, we see a multitude of models in different members. And in itself, it's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as there is competition and investment. All what we want is a well-functioning EU single digital market in which consumers have the choice and to access different services at the same high quality wherever they live, wherever they are. So as BEREC, we will continue this work with the aim of stimulating investments, private and public, in very high capacity network, while ensuring competition in the market. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Michel. That was great to hear. I always think BEREC is great to listen to in terms of the practicalities of regulation and implementing fibre. I'd now like to ask Luca Passando from Etsy to speak next.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Good morning. Thank you, Ian, and good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm here representing the initiative that has been taken at the technical standard level in order to push this fibre development and improvement. You had a wonderful number of and quality of information about the political side and how fibre is in the agenda of the European Commission. And I will now give you some ideas about what this attempt to improve the standardization of fibre is in the technical area. Etsy is the European Technical Standards for Telecommunication Institute, and receives contribution from not only from Europe, but from all over the world. So recently, back in December, Etsy created this, it's called ISG, Industry Standard Initiative group, to develop standards that will address fibre. And the group has been called Fibre 5th Generation, F5G, because there is a clear break of symmetry between what happens in the mobile area, where the technical work is done in a very timely way, paced manner in a few institutes that collaborate with each other, and mainly 3GPP is the technical leader and provides the technical specifications for the generations in mobile. And we know that nowadays we have available the most recent success, that is the 5th generation, is becoming available to everyone, starting from big centers, big cities. But that's not the same for the fixed area of networks, and in particular for fibre. There, the work has been done in a different approach by several very important institutions and organizations that are active in that area. And we have IEEE, we have ITU, we have as itself, but for a minor part so far, we have several others, IETF, that's defining the protocols, etc. This initiative by ETSI is trying to concentrate efforts and to establish a way of collaboration between the different actors that are have so far been active rather independently with some communication. There are means for these organizations to exchange information, to try to synchronize what they do, but that's not easy at all, being so different. For example, BBF is very important in defining the broadband forum, is very important in defining the access network, and it started from the old technology for ADSL, and then it evolved and defined all the optical access technology in collaboration with ITU. But then it's not so good, the collaboration when you extend it to many organizations, like I mentioned before. Therefore, we needed to do something, and this is the initiative F5G. F5G has started with 10 companies founding the group. One of them is Telecom Italia TIM, the company I work for, and I am operating as a chairman of the F5G initiative in ETSI. Several other members joined on the road to now. Now we have first-rank operators, industry leaders in manufacturing, and the participation as well of the administration, the European administration. So it's let's say from the first months of life, promising and apparently very successful, which simply gives the idea of how needed it was. And the idea is to try to make something very like with what the mobile area has done, work in generations, work in a timely way, and match what mobile has done, because mobile, as it has been said just before, needs the support of fiber. And the more and more with the 5th generation, where we are thinking of much smaller cells, and we need the fiber to reach to penetrate much more into into smaller areas where we have the antennas for the 5G. But it's not only connecting the 5G infrastructure, the 5G mobile radio, but it is the matter of improving the reach of fiber direct to the final user. And this means moving from fiber to the home, maybe to fiber to the desk or in each room, or to the desk in an office, instead of just getting to the building. And in industrial area, we want to be able to connect each individual production machine in the chain, which is extremely needed. So the group has activated several activities that are addressing also this match with the mobile, but then the scouting of the real needs for technology, with the reconstruction of the landscape and the exact position where we need to develop new standards and to harmonize the existing ones, maybe. This has to be done in strict collaboration with the existing organizations. They have a huge know-how, and they are extremely important. As I said, we cannot forget about that. It's not replacing them, their aim. It is to improve the overall action between the different organizations. So after 5 months of life, we have a good progress in our documents. We invite all the players in the market to join and to support and to contribute. That's it. We keep you informed about the evolution. The intention is quite aligned with the intention that you have been told about from the administration in Europe, but the administration all over the world. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, there will be a dedicated time for that.
Thank you very much, Luca. It's a very interesting subject. There's lots of synergy, of course, between 5G and fiber, and I think that's becoming increasingly apparent. I'd now like to ask Aurélie Pladoja-Coelho from FTTH Council Europe to speak next. Aurélie.
Thank you very much, Jan. Good morning, everybody. Maybe just a few words about the FTTH Council Europe for those who are not familiar with us. So the FTTH Council Europe is an industry organization with a mission to accelerate ubiquitous full fiber-based connectivities. Our members are mostly organizations deploying FTTH networks, manufacturers of FTTH solution vendors, telecom operators and investors, and we have currently approximately 160 members. First, and a bit to set the scene, I would like to share with you two numbers, two figures that we have, and they come from a study that we conducted 2 years ago about the socio-economic benefits of full fiber. And the first one, which is really striking in my view, is that 94% of non-FTTH users would consider subscribing to FTTH if it was made available in their area. This was conducted in Sweden, and it was a consumer survey. And I feel that this is something that is very important to say, is that when the consumer, when the end users are familiar with the benefits of full fiber, it seems that they really want to subscribe to fiber. That's a striking element in my view. And the second figure that I wanted to share with you is about actually the fight against climate change. And the fact that FTTH infrastructure is proven to have a positive impact on the environment. We know that, of course, but our study proved that we have 88% less greenhouse gas emission per gigabit compared to other access technologies. So I felt that maybe to set the scene, these were two very important figures about the socio-economic benefits of fiber that I wanted to share with you. But of course, there are many other benefits of full fiber, and they will only be possible, and we will have others that we could discuss afterwards. But this is only enabled if we have investment in fiber. And that's why I would like now to discuss about the factor determining a fiber investment. These remarks will echo quite a lot what Michel said, but maybe from another perspective. First of all, I think the key element to determine the investment in fiber is a high-level political commitment at national, but also at European levels. Michel touched upon the code, the European Electronics Communication Code, and the very high capacity definition. We feel that this is actually an extremely important signal for the investor community, for the telecom operators, that for the first time we have an investment objective alongside the three usual traditional objectives in the code, and this shows that well, now the regulators will have to work for investment in very high capacity networks and in take-up of very high capacity networks. And these networks are defined alongside or are understood as to be FTTH, FTTB, or other technologies alongside the quality parameters of fiber. So this is something that we feel is of high importance. And I also mentioned national political commitment. And what I mean by this is continuity. It's very important for the investors to get the clarity of the policy, and that, of course, we have election, we have a lot of change in the governments, but that there is an overarching objective of full fiber, which is guaranteed, if I may say, by the policy. So that is one. Of course, the measures that make the actual deployment quicker, faster, less costly, and less red tape are also very important. Clearly, we agree that the broadband cost reduction directive is an important one, and that addressing permitting and administrative delays are key in this revision. Another element also is the migration to full fiber and the copper switch off. We see that the progress in the different member states are really patchy. Some member states are extremely advanced for migration to full fiber, starting even copper switch off. Other member states are still lagging behind, and we feel that there is a need for clarity for this. The reason for this is also for the investors. It's very important to understand the fate of copper and what will happen to fiber for the investment business case, both for traditional former incumbent telecom operators who will have to run two parallel networks at the same time and who need to understand what will be the condition for switching off copper, but also for new type of investor who are investing in their own network. So that's very important, and also to mention that copper switch off results in 40 to 60% of energy saving due to the lower power consumption of fiber. So we feel that there is a need for a dialogue at EU level for this. And maybe one last element that I would like to discuss also, we talked about 5G a lot, and we feel that actually 5G is a huge opportunity for fiber, because of course we can all agree that there will not be any 5G without fiber. And something that is important to mention also is that there could be some opportunities for saving if the networks are well planned. We conducted a study last year about 5G and fiber for 5G. And what we found out after analyzing a variety of scenarios is that if you plan your FTTH, FTT 5G, so what I call FTTH 5G is a fiber to a 5G antenna or fiber to a base station, is that if the network is anticipating while planning your FTTH network, the potential for cost saving for the fiber part of the 5G network due to convergence is in the range of 65% to 96%. That means that you can actually almost get the fiber part of your 5G network for free. So this is something that I really wanted to mention, because I feel that planning ahead when deploying 5G and FTTH is a lot of potential for cost-saving opportunities. I think I will stop there, and I'm happy to then go to the discussions afterwards. Thank you.
That's great. Aurélie, thank you very much for that contribution. FTTH Council Europe, of course, at the forefront of the debate for many years, and I think getting more and more to the central ground, I think, as the rest of us, as it were, catch up. I'd now like to ask our final panelist to speak, Hui Cao from Huawei. Hui.
Viruses transitioning into digital, and this kind of digital way.
Hui, sorry to interrupt. We seem to have a slight issue with your sound. Do you want to try that again? No, we can just about hear you. We can't hear you very well, unfortunately.
Right. Okay.
That's better.
Okay. Some IT issues. So, right. I will try to speak louder. It's getting better now.
Yeah, it's a little bit better. Yeah. So that's
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Maybe I need a new headset or earphone later on. As a digital tools for myself. Again, the coronavirus is turning our life into digital. We all are learning to navigate in this so-called new normal. I think two lessons are learned from the broadband perspective during the COVID-19, which are related to connectivity and capacity. And during the pandemic, we all rely on the broadband. We have to work from home, and children have to study online. And also our social entertainment is also relying on the internet to watch video online and play video online. So connectivity is not something we can miss. And also it's even the lifeline, particular for vulnerable. So that's still a clearly urban-rural digital divide for in Europe. We have to make sure no one gets left behind. So there's a lot of work for all of us in the ecosystem, in the industry, to work together to bridge the urban-rural digital divide issues. And also, it has been observed that around 50 to 70% of average traffic increasing was recorded during pandemic. So our broadband service are under high pressure. So thanks to joint effort with the Commission and BEREC, also with the support of any stakeholders of the industry to manage that challenge properly. So that this gives us a really good lesson. The increasing internet traffic reminds us to invest more in fiber deployment in order to improve the bandwidth and capacity and enhance the network experience as well. So in broadband network, Gigabit is becoming the global trend. We see much faster progress to migrate from copper network to fiber. We also see the upgrade from GPON to 10 GPON in the fiber networks. There were also more than 230 operators within 57 countries have launched Gigabit services with more than 20 packages which are providing 10 gigabit bandwidth services. So those are something encourage us to move faster towards gigaband. From very high capacity network point of view, it's not only related to the access bandwidth, it's also about to provide high bandwidth, high capacity from the access to the upper layers, including the metro and the local, the backbone. That requires a full fiber architecture, which actually is leading the F5G standardization, which is particularly important for our industry to move concretely towards the next generation with F5G approach. So from business scenarios, it's also an urgent need to build a world-leading fiber infrastructure in Europe to support the digitization of industries. Business needs fiber more than other broadband services due to its high performance and stability and capacity. In terms of enterprise applications, the faster deployment of enterprise cloudification, to provide all optical campus, and also to provide optical access to the business buildings, and also to provide premium private lease line services. Those have become the foundation to conduct the business in a digital way. The continuity of business and the support of a full fiber is critically important. So the fiber supports the digitization of our industry and stimulates the economic growth very efficiently. When we choose fiber, we are also choosing green. When the light is running through the optical fiber with very minor signal loss compared with other physical materials, such like copper or coax, in this way, the optical distribution network costs zero power consumption. In a technical study we analyzed recently, the comparison between copper coax technology and also a full fiber network, it shows the full fiber network is able to achieve at least 60% or more energy savings. Therefore, they can be an excellent component of Europe's digital Green Deal for a smarter and more sustainable future for all. So green fiber can be the cornerstones of the sustainability efforts of the European Gigabit society, while also facilitating the digitization that is here to support our union's economic recovery. So we need to bring the full fiber connectivities for everyone to everywhere. So thank you. That's my comments I want to share with all of you today.
Thank you very much, Hui. So we're now going to the, well, I guess, plenary session. So we're going to have all our panelists up. Here they come. And we're taking questions from our audience participants, and we're getting a lot of those. So we'll be coming to those in a moment. So thanks for those. Please keep them coming. What I'd like to do actually is just kick off with a more general question, particularly thinking of Franco, who I know was had a lot to pack into his initial remarks. But this isn't just for Franco, but it's to the extent to which there are particular initiatives from the Commission in particular, which are likely to help accelerate the deployment of FTTH networks. Franco, in particular, you know, were there some other points that you'd like to highlight on that?
Thank you, Dan. Well, I mean, the question is extremely difficult on my side because we act on so many dimensions. So I prefer to be very selective because otherwise I take even more time. So I spoke before about investments we are currently doing today, or in the past annual framework. Let me elaborate a little bit on the CEF digital program. I hear a little bit of background noise, by the way. Not sure if there is any of the other speakers with the microphone. Maybe better to mute it. Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, a program essentially devoted, I mean, to make Europe 5G ready. And for doing this, I mean, of course, fiber is vital, as it has been said. I mean, so I would also call it a fiber program to make it very straight. So, in fact, I can mention a couple of examples there where fiber will become the target investment of the program. So we expect their proposal projects to address market failures. We expect proposal projects to have a leverage effect on investments. As I said, because it's a grant-based program, and grants by definition they are shared cost programs. So we have a co-funding levels. So one example I can mention is the so-called 5G communities, we call it, which has two flavors, let's say, or even perhaps three, but the most relevant for this event is the first two. One is deployment in areas with the severe market failures, so where basically there is no fiber. So we call them standalone projects, which aim to bring fiber to socioeconomic drivers like hospitals or schools. It will be co-funded at 70% of the total eligible cost. Such eligible costs are the deployment basically of passive optical networks, as well as active equipment to socioeconomic drivers. And the order of magnitude of the project we expect in this part is in the order of 20 million. So, of course, I mean, the proposals, the investors have to demonstrate the unviability to deploy fiber in wider areas. So market failure is a fundamental, let's say, prerequisite for application. The other one is what we call the mild market failure part, where we aim at a comprehensive deployment of energy efficiency fiber infrastructure to connect all socioeconomic drivers and households all together in a target area. Sorry. So the principle is that the investment will kickstart a virtuous investment process in those areas where there is no obvious economic, let's say, interest by it. So we do that by stimulating, because this will not happen automatically. It will happen only if there is a real demand. So within this project, we really aim at attracting, let's say, use cases, concrete use cases, so stimulating demand and appetite, of course, for competition. The level of investment is in the order of 30% of the overall cost. So with the let's say an average, let's say, predictable level of investment of funding of 60 millions, and this is really devoted to fiber to base station, but also to the SEDs and households. So of course, I mean. This is tightly connected, as I said before, to the future extensions in 5G wireless, of course. So participants will have to demonstrate that there is this potential for future extension, for instance, by studying, by associating to the proposal particular studies associated with targeting the particular areas of they want to focus on. So, and of course, I mean, I would repeat, I mean, that these investments should demonstrate that the project will not overbuild or crowd out private investments there. Of course, we have other type of examples that I can mention on the regulatory side. I mean, so we know that the code foresees the possibility to designate areas with no where no VHCN networks are available. So how we can do that? I mean, Michelle mentioned some of the guidelines. I can mention the one hooked on Article 22, the BEREC guidelines on geographical surveys, that we are working together with BEREC as well. So on this basis, member states can ask competent authorities and RAs that can invite potential public and private investors to declare their intentions to upgrade or build a new VHC and infrastructure in particular areas. So for these guidelines, we have two phases. The first phase is really targeting the quality of service theoretical performance, and this has been published in March, so it's available for download from our own site and also BEREC. And the second part of the guidelines is more on the verification of data, which is quite challenging, where we are working on together with BEREC, and the expected publication is beginning 2021. So, of course, there are other related provisions there, to mention, for instance, Article 81, which is on copper switch off. And of course, looking at the future, we can of course think to do even more. But I mean, we are reflecting in this moment internally on what else we can do. I mean, we can think about really completing the guide, of course, for broadband investments. We have been working on for some time now. So this goes in parallel with the work of BEREC on the geographical surveys. But of course, it will include much more information, including including the state aid. It's a guideline for investments. This is important, of course, because it provides a kind of level of uniformity, coherent message to all the investors, especially public investors, of course. So we expect to publish these later this year. Then we can think about other things like the revision of the Broadband Cost Reduction Directive, which includes, of course, a lot of enablers and incentives for VHTN investments, and therefore also to progress toward fiber society. Further simplification, certainly, for instance, on permit granting, simplification in general, and harmonization of regulation, including possibility for alignment of the broadband cost reduction in the code. Then fostering network sharing and joint rollout, which is already available in the code, but I mean, elaborating that even further. And of course, I mean, linking to what Orly said, I mean, environment is very much at the core of our priorities. So environmental sustainability measures, I think, should be studied and also investigated. There is, of course, internal reflection on this, but of course, I cannot elaborate too much on that. But certainly, the interchange of views with the community, like the one participating in this event, is fundamental for us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Franco. What I'd like to do is just move on to questions from registrants, from the audience. In fact, we've got a lot of questions, and some of them are really good ones. The first one we have is from Supantha Mukherjee at Thomson Reuters, and that's a question that asks whether the pandemic has accelerated the deployment timeline for faster broadband. Can I ask panelists to see if they've got a particular perspective on that, perhaps? Well, Michelle or Aurélie, perhaps, kicking off on those.
Well, I would say that at this stage, of course, it's a bit difficult to tell, because I think that we will need some time to be able to really assess the impact of the crisis on fiber development. And I would also say that it really depends on the member states. There are some countries where infrastructures and digital networks are considered as critical infrastructure, and the works never stopped. And in other countries, that was not the case, and the works were stopped. So there were some mitigation measures, or people could work in the streets, but they could not go to the home, of course. So it's really something that we would like to assess at a later stage. But what I can say, at least now, is that there were some speed ups in some countries, and completely stopped and the work completely stopped in others.
Yeah, thanks. Michelle, you okay on that? Yeah. Anything else? Anyone else would like to add to that point? Yeah, Michelle.
Yes, thank you very much, Jan. If I may add, of course, the targets are remain the same for the time being. So it's I think too soon for that. And of course, those are the lessons we have learned from the crisis, as I already mentioned. And I think that more than ever, this is crucial for society and the economy, but it will also depend on the recovery, the economic recovery in the coming months and years. But again, it is too soon to conclude that because of this pandemic, there will be a faster deployment of very high capacity networks. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. And we also have another great question, this time from Nicola Somlev at BTC PLC. what are the services which full fibre is particularly enabling? I think it would be great, Hui, if you, with your China experience, can comment on that. I know in China there's some particularly interesting developments going on in business applications of full fibre, but perhaps others as well. If we can hear you. Okay, I think we've got a microphone problem, Hui. Yeah, we can't quite hear you at the moment. Yeah, try again one more time. Hui, do you want to try? No. Okay. So,
yeah, okay. It's getting better. Back now.
Okay.
Okay. So come back to the China case. I think it's always about the network capacity which Europe is working on, because one of the benefits from the fiber infrastructure in China market, we see more than 80%. Even for the Asia Pacific, more than 80% of broadband users are choosing fiber. Only less than 10% of broadband users are staying with the DSL. So that gives a significant, difference in terms of the capacity they are able to afford. So the business applications, particularly, we see more cloud-based applications are running in China, also in Asia market. So those applications require higher bandwidth. For instance, the cloud VR services will require at least 100 meg BPS. So, but if we want a particular services to be a popular application for all, we need a decent infrastructure with guaranteed capacity. So that means it's nothing, from application point of view, it's nothing special, but the experience will change the perception of the consumers, of the market. With a better user experience, the consumers are willing to take more digital applications and also to use those digital applications in their daily life. So concretely speaking, if I say the difference between China and Europe is still about the penetration of the fiber infrastructure, which allows the high capacity or bandwidth consuming applications to be implemented in the market to allow the majority of users to enjoy it. So that's my comments.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, certainly from our point of view here in the UK, there's a lot of basic multi-user residential activity going on, and certainly here in Oxford, where I am, just about every household in Oxford is got multiple users of Zoom on a daily basis at the moment, and I think that's really accelerating the trend. Do any other panelist members have things to comment on that, on the particular applications or services enabled by fiber?
Well, only say, having read some part of this report, I think the answer is there basically. So I want to highlight the difference between reacting to the emergency and providing what we can now consider new universal type of services. I mean, the right to study from home or to do e-shopping from home because there is no alternative. But for the post-COVID, of course, the scenario we can think about are unimaginable, or we can imagine, but it is really putting a significant acceleration. There will be the demand for a greater connectivity, for symmetric type of connectivity will be more and more, of course, present, because we are also running business from home. In this moment, we are actually doing business from home. So the type of connectivity and different market offer, in the past you could see distinguish between the business and the consumer type of, probably will tend to converge, probably. But I mean, there are plenty of foresight studies on that we can refer to.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. I've got one actually specifically for Berek, Michel. What is Berek this is coming from Peter Kernow Ford. Peter Kernow at Ford Viatech. What is Berek doing to change the regulatory push to one of investment rather than competition on price? And this is something that we at Analysys Mason looked at in our report. And there's always a dichotomy, or can be a dichotomy between the two. And Michel, any particular comments on that? Investment rather than competition on price.
Thank you very much, Ian. I dare say that competition is part of Berek's DNA since the very beginning. Reason why we have this so-called Article 7 procedure and notification to the Commission of Market Analysis, especially when it comes to access regulation. And this is one of the core business of Berek's member and Berek itself. It has been the case for years, and it is still the case. But it is true that we have another very important objective in a way that we need to promote the deployments and the access to a very high capacity networks and investments for those networks. As I mentioned in my introduction, there is a need for a right balance between these two objectives. But I wouldn't say that we are ignoring competition for the time being. That's not right. That's not the case. Over to you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks. And a kind of a related question as well, quite a subtle one. We've got obviously a lot of expert attendees. One of them is Christophe Legutko from Intel, and he has a commission-related question, which Franco, I know you have very specific remit, so do say if this is not appropriate for you. But it's what is the Commission doing to change the regulatory approach from supporting the competition of infrastructures to support the competition of infrastructure developers? And that's from Christophe at Intel. Franco, have you got a particular view on that?
I have to say that this is a part of the area of that is not really under my competence. So
right.
Certainly we know, and I'm aware that my colleagues are working intensively to tackle that to stimulate competition at all levels, to be honest, but in particular also on infrastructure support, on infrastructure developers. So I take note of that, and maybe we can get in touch bilaterally and provide you with the appropriate answers. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have any view on that?
Maybe Michel can say something.
Not really.
Okay. I don't, Dan, if you've got any more questions from the floor, please send them. Otherwise, I've got a few other questions as well. I think one of the things that is often discussed is the pace at which different countries are implementing. And I think a case in point is Germany here, which is just so important. Obviously, one of the most important European countries by most measures, and also one of those with amongst the lowest fiber access coverage. And I was just wondering to what extent our panel today see a real shift happening in German policy. Obviously, there's the 12 billion euro plan that they mentioned last year, and there's the Commission's announcements yesterday. Do we feel that Germany is, this is the time for Germany now? Any views on that? Yeah, Michel, please.
Thank you, Ian. What's the situation in Germany for the time being? So broadband services are in the nationwide copper network and cable network, covering around 2/3 of German households, with transfer rates from 100 to 250 megabits on copper networks and up to 1 gig to the cable network. So more than 50% of German households have access to 1 gigabit bandwidth by mid-2020, mainly due to this upgrade on cable network. And of course, what are the burden for a quick deployment of FTTH in Germany? It's maybe the good state of the legacy infrastructure on the one hand, together with the upgrade possibilities, and also the fact that most consumers are currently not willing to pay higher prices for FTTH. This being said, of course, the regulator, the German government, the operators are well aware that there is a clear goal for making gigabit connection possible and all the benefits from fiber networks. That's the reason why there is a kind of growth up to 4 million in the first quarter on 2019, for FTTH. The German companies have more or less doubled their investment up to about 10 billion in 2019 compared to 2010. And of course, Deutsche Telekom, for instance, declared to invest more, and in some part with the state aid from regions. So I think that it is moving in Germany, and maybe Aurélie can confirm that according to this FTTH Council Fiber Market Panorama 2020, Germany is amongst Europe's top fastest growing market. That's all I can say for the time being. Over to you, Jan.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle.
Maybe I can try to just to comment on what you just said, Michelle. So I would fully agree indeed that well, there is a lot of potential for growth in Germany. This is the good side of starting very low, but we see that actually Germany is catching up quite quickly. It is actually in the top 5 of fastest growing markets for home passed, with the result of our latest market panorama indicate that there was an increase of 33.5% in terms of home pass. So this is something that is quite interesting as a figure. And also, well, you mentioned Deutsche Telekom, and there are also a lot of other more local telecom operators who are investing, focusing also on rural areas, and they really do the work of connecting Germany. Well, I would say for this that, well, the most important part is really to encourage competitive fiber investment by ensuring that there is access obligation which take into account the risk incurred by the investing operator. And I feel that this is something that is quite a key element in the investment decision as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for that. I have a question for Luca in a moment. Just before we go to that, anybody else want to comment on that German question? Okay. All right. So Luca, I have one for you. How will fiber networks support the rollout of 5G networks in Europe, and to what extent do you see delays in rollout of fiber, full fiber, as a major obstacle to successful deployment of 5G?
I believe it is essential, the deployment of fiber to support 5G. When 5G was first proposed, there were lots of studies, and for example, in my company and in standard organizations, in standard groups, trying to decide what approach to follow for deployment of the new radio and the connection to the new radio. That showed that the need of new fiber was terrible, because you cannot have on the same infrastructure that was the device to connect households, companies, etc. You cannot have also the 5G because there would be a penalty for everyone in that way. So new fiber is needed, and it needs to penetrate more into the urban and let's say civil infrastructure to be able to connect the new radio, which has higher frequencies, shorter reach, etc. And that's terribly important. There is no way to avoid that. We need to push and to enable also the 5G. Of course, in areas where there is already a high deployment of fiber, where, for example, big urban centers, big cities, there things are easier because the redundancies, etc., can be exploited. But the penetration has to be more than that, and the services of 5G go beyond what is accessible now without deployment of new fibers.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Luca. We're coming to the end of the session now. There was a poll that we ran amongst participants, a live poll that's just closed. And that question was, what do you see as the main obstacle to achieving full fiber rollout in Europe? And we got some interesting results to that. We had 10% of respondents picked high cost of labor and lack of skilled workforce. 15% of respondents challenges related to planning laws. 13% lack of market demand, which we've discussed. But there were two equal winners of the poll from our audience today, both at 31%, so almost a third each. And those responses were the regulatory environment, favouring competition over investment, and secondly, challenges related to physical infrastructure of legacy copper networks. So that's quite an interesting combination, I think, and I think gives a lot of pause for thought amongst some regulators in terms of getting the balance right between investment and competition as well. So thank you very much for that. We're just coming to the end now, so I'm just going to wrap up, if I may. And I think we've had a very interesting and stimulating discussion today. There can't be much doubt that even before the current crisis started, we were entering an exciting phase of full fiber development in Europe. Already there's some evidence of operators accelerating fiber deployment with COVID as far as is possible, given social distancing. Based on what we've heard today, it may well be that once we get through the immediate health crisis, we'll see a marked shift in the thinking of many governments around Europe in favour of a more active approach to not just public health, but many aspects of economic management, including broadband policy. It's certainly our hope at Analysys Mason that more proactive policy thinking on broadband will help lead us out of recession. I'd now like to close today's session, but we'll leave the chat function open for private networking if participants will care to use it. So thank you all very much for participating today, for your time, both panelists and audience members. Very much hope to see you again soon.
Hi guys. So yeah, just to echo what Ian has said there. Thank you so much to everyone for their participation. Thank you to Ian. Thank you to all of our panelists, and of course, thank you to everyone there for your questions and comments. I know that there were a number of questions that were asked that we weren't able to get round to, so we will be forwarding those on to the excuse me, the panelists after the event, and I'm sure that they will be able to come back to you on some of those bilaterally. So thank you so much for all of your questions and things with that. One other thing to mention, you have heard a report mentioned a number of times today, a report that Analysys Mason have released today on these issues, and that is going to be a link, I should say, to that is going to be sent out to all of you immediately following the event via email. So you will all receive a link to that report. Along with other information about the event. We're also going to be adding on that email, you'll have a post-event feedback form, which we'd love to ask you to complete, and let us know how you found the event. We're really interested to know how you found the event and your experiences, but all that will be sent to you very shortly after the event. So in a second, I'm going to be opening up the networking area of the platform. As I said, we are having some time available now for networking, and we'll be opening that very shortly. But just before I do, I wanted to mention the next few events we have coming up as part of this Under the Spotlight series. And you haven't got to wait too long, because the next event we have is actually going to be tomorrow. So tomorrow we have speakers including Daniel Callejo Crespo, Director General of DG Environment at the Commission, is going to be, and other speakers will be taking part, I should say, in a discussion around the Green Deal and its role in the Commission's recovery plan, of course, which you've heard a little bit about today and was released yesterday. And then next month, then in June, we have a discussion on GDPR, which will take place on the 18th of June. Exactly 2 years on from the release of the report, the GDPR report, and that will look at the achievements so far and the challenges that still remain. And then we have a number of other events as well, and you can find details of all of these events and more via our website, www.forum-europe.com. But for now, I would like to once again thank all of our speakers for their involvement today and the really interesting discussions that we've had. This closes the formal part of the event. However, as I mentioned just now, we are now going to be opening the networking platform. And we'd like to invite you all to stick around and use the opportunity to meet and chat with some of your fellow participants via the private one-to-one meeting rooms that we have available. So for those of you who haven't used this platform before, there are two ways you're now going to be able to do that. You can either visit the networking area on the left-hand side of your screen, and that will enable you to click and be randomly matched to meet and speak with other attendees. So you'll have the opportunity to be matched with other people and then have I think it's 3 minutes to speak with them, and if you want to then to exchange contact details afterwards. So that's the kind of match you with other people who are attending on a random basis. Or alternatively, the other option you can use, if you click on the People's tab on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll be able to chat to people and have private chats in that way, and also then invite them to join you for a one-to-one video conversation. So you can actually connect with people and target and directly join on a video chat room, and that with people who are attending on the event. So the platform's going to be open again for the next 30 minutes or so. So please do go ahead and use that. And in the meantime, once again, thank you all very much for your participation today. I really hope that you've all found the event interesting and useful, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you all at another event very soon. So thank you very much, and goodbye.